Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling a topic that's super important for all you dog lovers out there. We're talking about canine parvovirus.
Parvo for short.
Right, parvo. It's something every dog owner should be aware of, so we're going to break down all the essentials you need to know to keep your furry friends safe and sound.
Sounds good to me.
Awesome. So let's kick things off with the basics. What exactly is parvo, and what makes it such a concern for dog owners?
Well, parvo is a highly contagious viral disease that mainly affects a dog's gastrointestinal system.
Oh, the gut. So like a really bad stomach bug.
Kind of, but much more serious. You see, parvo is caused by a group of viruses, specifically canine parvovirus types 2A, 2B, and 2C.
Okay, there are different types.
Yep. And what makes these little guys so tricky is that they're incredibly hardy. They can survive in the environment, like for months, even in extreme temperatures.
Wow, they're tough.
Serious.
So even if an infected dog was in an area a while ago, other dogs could still be at risk.
Exactly. And that's not all. They're also resistant to many common disinfectants because of their tough outer shell.
So it's like trying to fight a microscopic supervillain. It really makes you realize how important prevention is.
It really does.
Now, I'm curious, how did this virus even come about? It sounds like a pretty recent threat, right?
You're right, it is. Canine parvovirus most likely mutated from a similar virus found in cats. It's called feline panleukopenia virus, or FPV for short.
Interesting. So it jumped from cats to dogs.
Exactly. Back in the 1970s, a few small changes in the virus's genetic code allowed it to make that leap. And within a few years, it had spread globally.
Wow, that's incredible. A few tiny tweaks in its DNA turned it into a worldwide threat to dogs.
It's amazing how viruses can evolve and adapt like that.
It really is. Okay, so talking about spreading, how exactly does parvo get around?
Primarily through contact with infected dog feces, either direct contact or indirect contact.
Direct contact, I get it. Like if dogs sniff or lick contaminated poop. But what do you mean by indirect contact?
Well, that's where things get a bit tricky. The virus can hitch a ride on shoes, clothes, toys, even just the ground.
So even if my dog isn't, directly interacting with other dogs, they can still pick it up from the environment. That's kind of scary.
Yeah, unfortunately it is. And to make matters worse, infected dogs shed huge amounts of the virus in their feces, so even tiny traces can be dangerous.
That's unsettling.
Huh.
Okay, so let's say a dog does come into contact with parvo. What are the signs? What should owners be looking for?
Well, the most common form of parvo affects the intestines, and the symptoms are usually pretty noticeable. You might see your dog becoming lethargic, withdrawn, losing their appetite. They might develop a fever as well.
Those sound like pretty general symptoms, though. Anything more specific to parvo?
Definitely. Along with those initial signs, you'll likely see vomiting, often with yellow mucus and bloody diarrhea with a very foul smell. These are pretty clear indicators of parvo.
Yikes, that sounds awful. Poor pups. What should an owner do if they suspect their dog might have parvo?
Don't wait. Contact your vet immediately. Early intervention is crucial when dealing with parvo.
So it's a race against time?
You could say that. The vet will diagnose parvo based on the dog's clinical signs, a physical exam, and a quick test called a fecal ELISA. It detects the virus in the dog's stool.
All right, so what happens if the vet confirms it is parvo? Is there a cure?
Unfortunately, there's no cure for the virus itself.
Oh, that's disheartening.
It is, but there's good news. We can provide excellent supportive care to help your dog fight off the infection.
Okay, so what does supportive care involve?
Well, the main focus is keeping the dog hydrated because they lose a lot of fluids through vomiting and diarrhea. So fluid therapy is key, usually intravenous fluids. We might also give medications to control the vomiting and diarrhea and also prevent any secondary infections.
It sounds like a very intensive approach to treatment.
It can be, but remember, we're doing everything we can to support their bodies while their immune system fights off the virus. And honestly, the best way to deal with parvo is to prevent it in the first place.
You're absolutely right. Prevention is always better than cure, especially with something as serious as parvo. So what's the most effective way to protect our dogs?
Vaccination, without a doubt, it's the most powerful tool we have against parvo.
Right, those puppy shots. So what's the typical vaccination schedule?
Puppies can start their vaccinations as early as 6 weeks of age, and they'll need a series of booster shots, usually every 3 to 4 weeks, until they're at least 16 weeks old.
So it's a multi-step process to get them the best protection.
It is.
What about adult dogs? Do they need boosters too?
Absolutely. Even adult dogs need regular booster shots, usually annually or as recommended by your vet.
So vaccination truly is the key to preventing parvo.
It really is. And while we've talked a lot about prevention, it's important to understand how this virus actually affects a dog's body. It's not just about the outward symptoms, there's a lot happening internally as well.
That's a great point. We've covered a lot about protecting our pups, but I'm definitely curious to learn more about what's happening on the inside. But before we dive into those details, let's take a quick pause. We'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into canine parvovirus.
Welcome back, everyone. Now, before the break, we were discussing how crucial it is to grasp what's happening inside a dog's body when it's battling parvo.
You mentioned that it's not just about those external symptoms we observe, so what's actually taking place at the microscopic level?
Okay, so picture the lining of your dog's small intestine as this vital barrier. It's responsible for absorbing nutrients and keeping harmful substances out of the bloodstream.
Right, like a gatekeeper.
Precisely. Now, parvo, it specifically targets the cells responsible for regenerating this intestinal lining, particularly in these areas called intestinal crypts.
Intestinal crypts, huh? Those sound important.
They are. These cells are constantly dividing, which unfortunately makes them easy targets for the virus.
So the virus is messing with the body's ability to, repair itself.
Exactly. By destroying these cells, parvo prevents the intestine from repairing itself, leading to severe damage and compromising its function.
That's got to be rough. Is that why we see such intense vomiting and diarrhea?
It is. The damage to the intestinal lining disrupts the absorption of nutrients and fluids, which leads to those classic parvo symptoms, the vomiting and bloody diarrhea.
So it's like a vicious cycle. The virus attacks the gut, causing damage that leads to fluid loss, and then prevents the body from getting what it needs to fight back.
Yeah, it's a double whammy, unfortunately. And to make matters even worse, this damage to the intestinal lining can also allow bacteria that normally reside in the gut to leak into the bloodstream.
Oh no, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It can be. It can lead to a condition called sepsis, which is essentially a widespread inflammatory response.
An inflammatory response, so like the body is freaking out.
In a way, yes. It's the body's way of trying to fight off the invading bacteria, but sepsis can be very serious because it can lead to organ damage.
So on top of battling the virus and the damage it's causing, the body now has to deal with these invading bacteria too.
Sadly, yes. That's why that supportive care we talked about is so crucial. We're not only fighting the virus, but also managing these potential complications.
Wow, it's crazy how much this virus can impact the body. It's definitely not just a simple tummy bug.
Right, it's much more complex than that. Which brings us back to the importance of prevention. Vaccination is truly the best way to shield your dog from this potentially deadly disease.
You made that very clear. Now, earlier you mentioned that humans can unknowingly carry parvo on their hands or clothes. Does that mean we can actually get sick from it? I know some diseases can jump from animals to humans.
That's a great question. The good news is that canine parvovirus is species specific, meaning it can only infect dogs.
Okay, phew, that's a relief. But I imagine we should still be careful about hygiene, right?
Yeah.
Especially after handling dogs, to prevent spreading it to other pups.
Absolutely. Washing your hands thoroughly after handling dogs, especially if they've been in areas where other dogs frequent, is crucial. And if you have a dog that's been diagnosed with parvo, it's essential to disinfect any surfaces they've come in contact with. A bleach solution is best.
Speaking of disinfection, you mentioned that briefly earlier, but given how tough this virus is, what actually works to kill parvo? Do we need, hazmat suits and industrial strength cleaners?
It might surprise you, but the most effective weapon against parvo is readily available in most households.
Bleach.
Oh, really? Bleach, like the stuff under the sink.
That's the one.
Yeah.
A solution of 1 part bleach to 30 parts water is the gold standard for killing the virus.
Okay, good to know. Are there any other cleaning products that work, or is bleach the best bet?
While some pet-safe disinfectants claim to be effective, it's always best to check the label. Look for a specific mention of canine parvovirus. When in doubt, bleach is your safest bet. Great advice. Better safe than sorry. We've discussed prevention and how the virus works, but what about dogs who are already fighting parvo? What are their chances of recovery?
Well, it's tough to say for certain. The prognosis for dogs with parvo depends on several factors. Their age, overall health, and how quickly they receive treatment all play a role.
So it's a mix of things then.
It is. Early diagnosis and aggressive supportive care are critical. With proper care, many dogs do recover from parvo. It's not always a death sentence.
That's good to hear. But sadly, some dogs don't make it, which is why prevention is so important.
Absolutely. Early detection is vital as well. The sooner they receive treatment, the better their chances.
You mentioned different strains of parvo earlier, types 2A, 2B, and 2C. Are those just variations, or is one worse than another?
That's a question researchers are still trying to fully understand. You see, the original canine parvovirus, CPV2, emerged in the late 1970s, but it's been evolving. CPV2A appeared soon after and became the dominant type globally. Then, in the 1980s, we saw CPV2B, and more recently, in the early 2000s, CPV2C emerged.
Wow, so parvo's been changing over time.
It has. But thankfully, the vaccines we use are designed to protect against all the major variants.
So even though the virus is evolving, our vaccines are keeping pace.
Exactly. Offering our furry friends the best possible protection.
That's what you're hearing.
It really is. It's thanks to ongoing research and development in veterinary medicine.
Absolutely. There are some brilliant minds out there dedicated to keeping our pets healthy.
For sure. This deep dive into canine parvovirus has been pretty fascinating, albeit a little somber at times.
It has. But before we wrap things up, let's give our listeners a moment to process all this information.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
Indeed. We'll be right back with our final thoughts and some key takeaways to help you safeguard your furry companions. Welcome back, everyone. So we've really explored this canine parvovirus in depth.
We have, from what it is, how it spreads, to, the effects it has on a dog's body.
It's been a lot to take in.
It has.
But it's so important, right? Knowledge is power, and when it comes to parvo, prevention is absolutely key.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Vaccination is hands down the most powerful weapon we have in this fight.
It really is remarkable how a few simple shots can provide such strong protection for our furry friends.
It really speaks to the progress we've made in veterinary medicine.
Absolutely.
Something that's been on my mind this whole time is just how new this disease is.
That's true.
It only emerged in the 1970s. Makes you wonder what other threats might be out there lurking, waiting to make the jump from one species to another.
That's a sobering thought.
It is. We saw how quickly parvo spread worldwide, causing so much illness. It really highlights the connection between animal and human health.
It does. What affects one can often impact the other.
Exactly. We're all part of this delicate ecosystem.
We are.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with this. We've learned so much about parvo, but there's still so much we don't know.
That's the beauty of science. Always more to discover.
Right. Considering how parvo's already evolved, who knows what the future holds? New challenges, maybe? Will our vaccines hold up?
Those are the questions researchers are working hard to answer.
Exactly. It really underscores the importance of ongoing research and our support for it.
Couldn't agree more.
We can't get complacent. We have to stay informed, advocate for progress, and be proactive in protecting ourselves and our beloved pets.
Well said.
So, to all the dog parents out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into canine parvovirus. I hope you found it informative and empowering.
We hope you did. Remember, knowledge is power and prevention is the best medicine.
Keep those tails wagging, everyone. Until next time.